Good afternoon. I'm George Dame. I'm a reverend of the Episcopal Church here in Danville, master of the Roman Eagle Lodge. I'm just out to see my old friend Major Sutherland and his wife.
Good afternoon, Reverend. So good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for inviting me.
Major Sutherland's in his study. Why don't I get him and you come on with me into the dining room?
How are you, Reverend?
I'm fine, thank you.
Will everybody please have a seat? Reverend, would you like some tea?
Thank you, Miss Sutherland.
I'll see to it right away.
With so much going on, we haven't had much chance to catch up with each other, have we?
No, we haven't. I've had a lot to do with the Union prisoners and our own boys that are still in the hospital. I tell you, since this Union Army's been here, nothing's really the same. These are some hard times, and I don't know how much longer they're gonna continue.
These are trying times. But you have to admit that Danville and the surrounding areas have not suffered the hardships of other areas. Just look at Richmond. The ruins there, burned to the ground. And south of here, General Sherman and his troops just destroy all the towns, burn them to the ground. Farmhouses, barns burned, crops destroyed, horses and wagons stolen, and railroads and bridges destroyed beyond repair. Decent horse or mule cannot be found. And nobody in the South has any money to buy anything, to rebuild or even plant a crop.
Yeah, so many fine young men were killed and so much destruction. How's your business doing?
We're getting back on our feet. You know, the challenging part is trying to find enough labor, and trying to get financing for anything is almost impossible.
Were you finally able to get a pardon?
Yes, but it did take some time.
It was said that, your part in having President Davis and his cabinet into your home was what's kind of stood in the way of a pardon.
Yes, it did.
All that now seems so long ago, but I don't think anyone in Danville will ever forget these times or the hospitality our people showed under such trying circumstances. Do you?
I don't know, Reverend. I doubt that anyone 50, 100, or 150 years from now will have any idea what happened here, or who we were, or what we did.
The evacuation from Richmond was rather hurried. I think we departed around 11 o'clock. On our car was President Davis and his staff, Secretary Benjamin, Secretary Mallory, Secretary Reagan, Attorney General George Davis, and of course my husband George, who is Secretary of the Treasury, and myself. General Bragg and some of his staff were also on the train with us.
Secretary Breckinridge was the only cabinet member not on the train. He had been detailed to stay behind and oversee the evacuation of Richmond. Most people forget that Secretary Breckinridge actually had been Vice President of the United States from 1856 to 1860, a senator from Kentucky, and also he came in second in the election to Abraham Lincoln in 1860.
I think there were 4 trains, although I don't know who or what was on all of them. I know there were some troops from Georgia on one train, and that's because we hit some rough spots outside of South Boston. The flooring fell through from the train, and some of the soldiers fell and were killed. We had to stop and bury them on the side of the track. There were also a train that had the treasury on it, gold and silver, and some very important papers and documents were on another. Even a train in good repair does not move all that fast. But our trains were in terrible condition due to lack of parts to repair them. The Union cavalry had tore up track along the way, and we had to stop to repair it before we could continue on. We were all so tired. None of us really slept at all. The whole ordeal was exhausting.
When the Union forces finally overran General Lee's army at Petersburg in the Battle of Five Forks, then he notified the government and President Davis, who was in church, that they needed to evacuate Richmond.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President. Wrong. Davis.
And the plan had been to bring the government by train to Danville on the Richmond and Danville Railroad.
Mr. President, welcome to Danville.
Major Sutherland, good to see you, sir. Thank you for your hospitality. The cabinet will be right out.
Mr. President, we will be your escort, sir. We have a cavalry company at the edge of town for your protection, sir.
Thank you very kindly. We appreciate it, gentlemen. Come along, fellows. Let's proceed to the carriage, shall we?
Danville was considered to be a defensible town with the river directly to the north, and the idea was that General Lee would march southwest from Richmond to Danville, and General Johnston would move his army from around Raleigh in front of General Sherman's Union troops. He would move northwest, and they would both be here in Danville, where when the armies combined, they could defeat first Grant and then turn on Sherman and defeat him.
Today, we were the President Davis's cavalry escort. We met him at the train station and escorted his entourage to the Sutherland Mansion. Nobody knew if there was federal cavalry around, so we would have been on guard. You know, it was an honor to do it, to portray that, because the people that were doing it thought they were protecting the president with their lives because they didn't know what was happening.
Detail! Present! Halt! Order! Halt! 3 cheers for the president, boys!
Danville was the big supply depot during the war. They could collect supplies in Greensboro, they could collect supplies here in Danville and Lynchburg, and all of those could be funneled by rail on the Richmond and Danville Railroad to Petersburg. And that's how Lee's army was able to survive in Petersburg for the better part of a year. The Danville warehouses were completely full of supplies for General Lee's army. Something like 500,000 rations of bread, 1.5 million rations of meat. There was ammunition, gunpowder, clothing, shoes, everything that an army would need.
We've got carriages going to be bringing Jefferson Davis and his cabinet members up here. He's going to be giving a speech. We've got cavalry coming up to escort him. So we're trying to capture every aspect of Danville during those 10 days, at least symbolically, with somebody representing some portion of what occurred. and allows you to walk in the shoes to some degree of the soldiers back then, and gives a definite different perspective than merely reading about it. It kind of gives you pause. You realize I've been in units that historically took over 90% casualties, and you realize, you know, the majority of those guys were wounded, yes, but still a good number were dead and a good number would never recover.
All right. Attention, company! Present, halt!
Thank you, gentlemen. Bless you.
Showed up, pump. Order up, off. Parade, press.
All right. Thank you.
Didn't know how many was coming.
Good afternoon. We ready for the proclamation? To the people of the Confederate States of America, the General-in-Chief of our Army has found it necessary to make such movements of the troops as to uncover the Capitol and thus involve the withdrawal of the government from the city of Richmond. It would be unwise, even if it were possible, to conceal the great moral as well as material injury to our cause that must result from the occupation of Richmond by our enemy. It is equally unwise and unworthy of us, as patriots engaged in a most sacred cause, to allow our energies to falter, our spirits to grow faint, or our efforts to become relaxed under reverses, however calamitous. While it has been to us a source of national pride that for 4 years of unequaled warfare, we have been able, in close proximity to the center of the enemy's power, to maintain the seat of our chosen government free from the pollution of his presence, while the memories of the historic dead who have freely given their lives to its defense must ever remain enshrined in our hearts, and while the preservation of the Capitol, which is usually regarded as evidence to mankind of a separate national existence, was an object very dear to us, it is also true, and must not be forgotten, that the loss which we have suffered is not without compensation. For many months, the largest and finest army of the Confederacy, under the command of a leader whose presence inspires equal confidence in the troops and the people, has been greatly trammeled by the necessity of keeping constant watch over the approaches to the Capitol, and has thus been forced to forego more than one opportunity for a promising enterprise. The hopes and confidence of the enemy have been constantly excited by the belief that their possession of Richmond would be the signal signal for our submission to their rule and relieve them from the burden of their failing resources. Admonish them it must be abandoned if not speedily brought to a successful close. But it is for us, my countrymen, to show by our bearing under reverses how wretched has been the self-deception of those who believed us less able to endure misfortune with fortitude than to encounter danger with courage. We have now entered upon a new phase of a struggle, the memory of which is to endure for all ages and shed an increasing luster upon our country. Relieved from the necessity of guarding cities and particular points, which are important but not vital to our defenses, with an army now free to move from point to point and strike in detail the detachments and garrisons of the enemy operating in the interior of our own country, where supplies are more accessible and where the foe will be far removed from his own base and cut off from all succor in case of reverse. Nothing is now needed to render our triumph certain but the exhibition of our own unquenchable resolve. Let us but will it, and we are free. And who, in light of the past, dare doubt your purpose in the future? Animated by the confidence in your spirit and fortitude, which never yet has failed me, I announce to you, my fellow countrymen, that it is my purpose to maintain your cause with my whole heart and soul, that I will never consent to abandon to the enemy 1 foot of the soil of any of the states of the Confederacy, that Virginia, this noble state, whose ancient renown has been eclipsed by her still more glorious recent history, whose bosom has been bared to receive the main shock of this war, whose sons and daughters have exhibited heroism so sublime as to render her illustrious in all times to come, that Virginia, with the help of her people and by the blessing of Providence, shall be held and defended, and no peace ever made with the infamous invaders of her homes by the sacrifice of any of her rights or territory. If, by stress of numbers, we should be compelled to a temporary withdrawal from her limits, or those of any other border state, again and again we will return until the baffled and exhausted enemy shall abandon in despair his endless and impossible task of making slaves of a people resolved to be free. Let us not then despond, my countrymen, but relying on the never-failing mercies and protecting care of our God, let us meet the foe with fresh defiance, with unconquered and unconquerable hearts. Trenholm already went in, so I guess we're waiting for the other guys to.
Secretary of State Judah Benjamin. Secretary Trenholm, good afternoon.
Mr. Harrison, I wasn't aware that you had joined us yet.
I just arrived this afternoon. Mrs. Davis and the children are safe in Charlotte, so I thought I would come here and assist the President as best I could.
Well, that's courageous of you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome, sir. Gentlemen, I'll...
George, hello.
Hey, Judah.
Good to see you. I know you haven't been feeling too well lately.
I think I'm getting worse.
Postmaster General John Reagan.
Hello, John.
Good evening, sir.
Pardon me if I don't get up.
So, I've heard you've been ill. Please keep your seat.
Hello there. Good to see you.
Good afternoon.
Secretary of the Navy Stephen Mallory.
Good afternoon, Secretary Mallory.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon,
Good
sir.
afternoon,
Thank you.
Secretary Mallory.
President Davis has arrived.
Thank you. Be seated, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I trust you've all had a good day so far.
Yes, sir.
Let's get to business, shall we?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Let's see. Well, gentlemen, the first thing I need to do is inform you that this afternoon we have now heard from Secretary Breckinridge, and he gives the first reliable reports we've had from General Lee since we left Richmond last Sunday. Breckinridge states, I'll quote him here, "I left General Lee at Farmville yesterday morning where he was passing the river for temporary relief. There was very little firing yesterday, and I have heard none today. The straggling, however, has been great, and the situation is not favorable. I will join you as soon as possible."
Why would General Lee be at Farmville? That's not in the direction of Danville at all, is it?
Apparently, the Yankee cavalry has cut the railroad between Richmond and Danville and also cut the telegraph at Jetersville. I understand General Lee was required to attempt to cross the Appomattox near Sailor's Creek, and there was a tremendous battle. I understand that a large portion, almost a third of his troops have been lost, including most of the local regiment, the 18th Virginia.
Are you saying General Lee was defeated?
The Telegraph asserts that General Lee will be moving west along the South Side Railroad towards Lynchburg, hoping for supplies. Breckinridge has reported that he's collected a number of straggling supply wagons and delivered those supplies, as little as they were, to Lee's men, and that his small column had come under constant cavalry attack. Mr. Harrison, have you finished sending out telegram to Lynchburg arranging for supplies to be sent to General Lee?
Yes, I have, Mr. President.
Very good.
Have you had any word from Secretary Breckinridge about Richmond?
Only that there was a great conflagration. Most of Richmond, gentlemen, has been burned.
Did the Yankees burn Richmond?
Well, it's unclear from the reports. Some say the fires were set by looters. Others are saying that our orders to burn the cotton to keep it from falling into the federal hands were what started the fires.
Is General Lee still trying to join us in Danville?
I've telegraphed General Lee that we are waiting for him here in Danville, and we now have something on the order of about 4,000 effective troops here.
4,000 troops. You know, apart from Admiral Sims' 500 men of the James River Squadron and a little bit of Home Guard, what in the world do we have in the way of 4,000 troops?
I'm sorry, George, we neglected to inform you. General Beauregard has sent up the 7th North Carolina and 3 batteries of artillery. And they've arrived yesterday from Hillsborough.
Okay.
Oh, that's good news.
We have large numbers of stragglers. Well, I should think that when we get the reinforcements from General Johnston's army down near Raleigh, we should outfit them, and instead of sending them along to Lee, I believe we should hold them here until Breckinridge can arrive and tell us more about that situation.
Mr. President, Admiral Sims is here as you requested. Shall I show him in?
By all means, please show the Admiral in. Thank you for coming, Admiral, and congratulations to you on your daring and ingenious escape from Richmond with the sailors from your fleet.
Yes, my men were very resourceful, finding 2 locomotives and repairing them so that we could make our escape.
I heard your men use parts from the scuttled ships to repair the locomotives and use fence rails for fuel.
Yeah, but would you please describe to us the nature and disposition of the defenses you're now overseeing for the protection of Danville?
Certainly, Mr. President. As you instructed the day after your arrival, the trenches and earthworks south of the town have been redug and strengthened. These fortifications extend along a line from south of where we are right now to the river and down past the beyond the train yard.
Good, good.
My James River men are manning the artillery guns that we have, and the Dan River will act as our fortification to the north. My men are also digging new trenches at the intersection of Main Street and Floyd Street.
Excellent, Admiral Sims. Excellent work. I hereby confer upon you a new rank of Brigadier General of the Army, sir.
Thank you, sir. You're so gracious.
You can return to your duties now, General.
Good evening, Mr. President. Good evening to you, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Well, now, when General Lee joins us here and meets up with General Johnston in the Army of Tennessee, moving up from North Carolina, we will be able to combine our forces and defeat first Grant here in the north, and then turn on Sherman's forces in the south and defeat him too.
President Davis, I understand that General Lee is outnumbered in the field about 5-1, and General Johnston about the same.
Well, that's accurate, sir, but the Yankees are extended far from their line of supply and in hostile territory. They're weary of war, and they're operating in piecemeal groups. If we can combine our forces here, we will be well supplied with over 500,000 rations in the Danville warehouses. We'll be in friendly territory and have the advantage also of our courageous men who want to continue this fight. Well, let us move on to other business.
Yes.
Who would like to report to us first?
Mr. President, I'll report first.
Very good.
As you know, we've moved $523,000 of gold and silver in the Confederate Treasury, and some paper currency, and a chest of jewels that's donated by Southern ladies, and all of that with $450,000 from Richmond banks. We have moved here, and it's on a train on a siding off of Lynn Street. Now, we have taken some of that silver and we've deposited it in the Bank of Danville, thanks to Major Sutherland, and from there we continue to pay the government's bills. Now, after my directive of March 1st, I would tell you that we've had a number of citizens that have asked to redeem their paper currency for silver as we have allowed. The exchange rate is 60 paper dollars for $1 silver dollar. And many of the citizens of Richmond took advantage of that. Some of the citizens of Danville have shown interest, but they won't accept the Mexican silver dollars that I donated to the Treasury years ago. They only accept U.S. silver, so that has left us with mostly the Mexican silver.
Well, since operations are becoming normal again, when can the cabinet be paid?
Secretary Reagan, President Davis forbids the payment of any persons other than soldiers.
This coin is going to be a very troublesome elephant.
You're correct, Secretary Mallory. The weight of the coins alone is almost 20,000 pounds. It is difficult to transport. It taxes the locomotives and it strains the tracks, which are in miserable condition. When we have to move it by wagon, it takes many trips. The horses are so old and so tired and weak from hunger that they can barely move the weight of those coins in this infernal red mud.
If I may, gentlemen, the Treasury is under the guard of 60 midshipmen from the Academy in Richmond under Commander Parker. I picked these men because they are brave, honest, and strong officers. They're also gentlemen. They are well suited to work of this delicate nature.
Secretary Benjamin, do you have any news at all of Governor Smith's whereabouts?
We have some word, Mr. President, that the Virginia government escaped to Lynchburg. They're on their way to Danville. So you should hear something from them by tomorrow or the next day. They should be in town.
Good. Secretary Reagan, are the post office operations moving ahead?
Yes, Mr. President. We have established ourselves on the first floor of the Masonic Temple building on Main Street. We have found quite a bit of mail that accumulated here in Danville to be sent out by train. And we also had mail brought with us from Richmond. We have postmarked and sent what we could. Of course, with the train service to Richmond and Petersburg cut, we cannot deliver that mail, and we'll just hold it here until the situation improves.
That's good. In fact, that's excellent.
Mr. President, Lieutenant John Wise is here. He says that he has information pertaining to General Lee's army. Shall I send him in?
By all means, please, show him in.
Isn't that the young officer that was at Clover Station, Governor Wise's son?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Come in, son. What can you tell us?
My President, after 3 days' ride, I have seen General Lee yesterday.
Well, did you talk with him?
General Lee wishes me to inform you that he has been forced to alter his course of retreat towards Lynchburg. The men have not had but one meal since leaving Richmond, and the Federals are pressing them from all sides.
Do you think General Lee will be able to reach a point of safety with his army?
I regret to say no. From what I saw and heard, I am satisfied that General Lee must surrender.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Mr. Harrison, I'm sure this young man could use a meal. Would you see that if Miss Sutherland has something she can offer him?
Certainly, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you, young man.
Mr. President, what does this mean? Is General Lee defeated?
I'll tell you what it means, Mr. Reagan. If General Lee surrenders, we will have no troops between General Grant and Danville. We are all in peril here.
So what preparations should be made, Mr. President?
I think with the first thing we should discuss is that the Treasury is in danger. With your permission, President Davis, I will make arrangements to have a train move that Treasury to maybe as far south as Charlotte tomorrow.
Good. I'm reluctant to leave Virginia, but I have planned that if we must leave Danville, we will move by train to Greensboro. There, at least, we will have some temporary protection from General Johnston and the Army of Tennessee. Gentlemen, tomorrow is April 9th and it's Palm Sunday. We will conduct no business on that day, but we will meet again here on Monday. Gentlemen, yesterday I received a telegraph from General Lee dated April 6th. He states that he is in Farmville. Now, obviously, that's old news since the telegraphs have been cut. I responded to him that we are waiting for him here in Danville with rations and clothing for the men. I'm still unaware of the location of Secretary Breckinridge or how soon they might arrive in Danville.
To a few, very few, these will be days of hope. To many, very many, these will be days of despondency and even despair. For all of us, there'll be days of great anxiety.
Mr. President, Captain Graves is here with an urgent message for you.
Show him in right away, Mr. Harrison.
There's quite a commotion outside. Does this mean the end of the Confederacy?
This is bad news.
Gentlemen, as you have now read, Lee has surrendered and we have to leave town just as soon as possible. This does not mean the end of the Confederacy. We're going to fight it out all the way to the Mississippi.
They will never take me alive.
We must leave Danville at once. If the surrender was yesterday, the Yankees could be here within hours.
Yes.
Within hours.
Mr. Harrison, would you see that the trains are made ready for us to move on to Greensboro?
Yes, sir. I'll go to the train station and find Mr. Averill immediately. What time should I tell him to be ready?
Best give us 4 hours to pack, so please tell him 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, sir. Captain, please come with me.
Mr. Mallory, would you see that General Johnston is notified of Lee's surrender? Mr. Reagan, as soon as you've disposed of your duties, will you help with the Treasury records? Poor Mr. Trenholm is so very ill.
Yes, sir.
Secretary Benjamin, please try and notify Governor Smith that we will be leaving tonight. And would you also draft a letter to the mayor of Danville and the town council and thank them for their hospitality? Please tell them I had hoped to maintain the Confederate government on the soil of Virginia. However, the shadows of misfortune which were upon us when I came here have now grown darker.
Yes, sir.
President, do you have any money other than Confederate money?
No, madam, I have not a cent.
Take this and say no more about it.
I cannot accept, madam. I cannot. You and your husband are young and you will need this money. I am old and I have a feeling I shall not want for anything pretty soon. God bless you.
God bless you too.
Gentlemen, we are adjourned.